Hydrofield cuts through my neighborhood.
Say hi to the people. He came running over. He knew it was time for another episode of Fearlessly Authentic. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Lucky, your host, and we got Steve.
Hey, everybody.
The disembodied voice, which you will hear. And we have an awesome guest tonight. I'm going to welcome her for her first time on the show. This is Amira.
Hello.
It's so good to have you. I can't believe it took us this long to do a show together.
Me too, but I'm glad we're doing it. It's gonna be a great talk.
I know, absolutely. So do you want to give everybody a little, just background about you and tell them about maybe the show that you have, and then we'll get into tonight's topic.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Amira Napier. I have a YouTube channel called Empathic Times, and I also have a blog called Endemic Times. And I started my blog at pretty much the start of the pandemic when I got laid off and needed kind of an outlet for how I was thinking and viewing the world and our current situation at that time. And then my YouTube channel, Empathic Times, just kind of evolved from there. I talk about a lot of different things on that channel. I talk about propaganda and specifically media propaganda and the narrative spins that are always going on. And then I also try to focus a lot of my conversation on the domestic issues that we have here in this country. So things like inflation, the recession, and then how international situations are affecting us here as well. So things like the Ukraine war and how that's affecting our economy. And then also things like, global integration and things like that. And then another area of focus that I do try to do a lot of work on is talking about what's happening in different countries within the Middle East and Africa that are being seriously affected by our policies, the international policies that we have here in the United States that are being pushed and that are affecting hundreds and hundreds of millions of people in these different regions, from the exacerbation of the climate crisis being brought on by all of the different corporations that are ruining our climate and affecting these regions that are already in serious decline because of the endless wars that we've had and things like that. So I've talked about Palestine, Syria, Libya, Sudan, and my main focus is just really trying to speak about the issues that are not discussed a lot in the mainstream, and also talking about all of these different issues that we have here in this country that are affecting the working class because we're not elites, we're not part of the 1%. And so I'm really trying to voice those issues that are happening for us here.
Yeah, and I love the way that you do it on your channel. You really make them easy to digest, and they're really, like where I do like long form, like kind of content. You have it like it's really easy to digest what you're doing, and you have it nicely edited, and so
thank you.
You can see the effort that you make, and I think that's really great the way that you do it.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. I love the work that you do here. I think these kinds of conversations are really great to have. I love long form content personally. I don't necessarily have the energy myself to do that all of the time. And I certainly just don't have like the capacity, because I could go on for hours and hours and days, but the algorithm doesn't seem to like.
You'll just have to come here and hang out with us when you're like, I have something that I need to get out.
Anytime.
Absolutely. I love, I think I always say like when one of our boats rise, like all of our boats rise, because we're helping each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important thing to do, is to not just focus on people that have like, a gazillion followers and that already have the followers, but like having like, people that are in our community that need that, that should have that boost as well. I think that's really, that's really important. And, like it's hard to digest like all of the content because there's so much great content. There's so many great content.
There is.
But like, it's really nice though to be able to be able to pull people in and be like, oh my gosh, you know more about this than I do. and I would really love to, to share your wealth of knowledge with my audience, and hopefully, hopefully it gets both of our audiences to overlap more and to grow, and like that's just that's how we help each other, I think. So
I think so too. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited. And thanks again.
I know, I'm excited too. So we are going to be doing, like, I think this is probably like both of our firsts. Like, I don't know, Steve, have we ever done a reaction video like we're doing tonight?
I don't think we have.
I don't really think we have, but we are going to be watching Jimmy Dore's content, which is definitely not something that I normally do. On like a regular basis, I do on occasion. I heard a lot of feedback about this particular interview. It's the one about oh, there it goes. This is with RFK Jr. And so this is talking about Israel. And so that's why we were like, I think we better do this. I think we better react to this, because there's a lot in here that I felt like, just not really focusing on the Jimmy Dore aspect of it, but more on the RFK part about it. There was a lot of information that I thought could definitely use some clarification.
It's definitely convoluted.
And some pushback. And, it wasn't given in the context during this, this episode that they taped. So I'm like, wow, it kind of fell in our lap. Like, we should probably address some of these things, especially, we're talking about Palestine. So, I mean, like, and Israel. So, I mean, it just like, wow, it was just divine timing, I guess. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. So I'll go ahead and start it, and then I'll, just let me know if you want it, if you want me to pause it or whatever, if we want to stop to comment on it, and we'll do that. All right. I'm going to mute me, but I don't think it matters if you mute.
Okay.
So here you say Biden administration extends U.S. habit of interfering in other countries' domestic politics. Now it's threatening Israel with the ending of the special relationship between our two nations. As president, my support of Israel will be unconditional. Now, what do you mean when you say unconditional? Because I immediately thought, if Israel is going to drop a nuclear bomb, I mean, you don't even support America unconditionally. You're against the Iraq war. You're against Libya. You're against right now the Ukraine war. So you didn't support. So what did you mean by that?
I meant the special relationship that we have now, which Biden was threatening to end if the Israelis did not change a domestic policy about having to do with their judicial reform. Now, I want to say this. I am against that judicial reform. Israel has not probably, but Israel has the best judiciary in the world. It's better than ours. It is more humane. It is the only country in the world that outright forbids torture, even in the ticking time bomb scenario. It's the only judiciary that's actually specifically addressed the ticking time bomb scenario. So you have a terrorist who you've caught, who knows there's a bomb that's going to kill tens of thousands of civilians. And the Israel judiciary has said, even in that case, you cannot torture him. No other judiciary in the world says that. The Israel judiciary has, there's, I think, 3 of the 12 Supreme Court justices are Palestinians. There are Palestinian judges all over, as there are legislatures, and it's guaranteed, full participation of Palestinians.
So that's actually something that I have been trying to look at all day long, and there is really nothing to support what he just said about there being 3 Palestinians on the judiciary. so I mean, I'm open for correction of myself, but like I couldn't really find anything to support that. And it also seems like a lot from the rhetoric that I've seen over the years is that Israeli Palestinians, because that's essentially how they would be categorized, are very reticent to join the judiciary, so to become lawyers and kind of be part of that, because they would be part of a minority. And that's something that, like, if we were to look at that from like here in the United States, we don't have as many minorities within the legal system as we should and as we need to have, so that we have adequate representation. And part of that comes from like this good old boys crew that we continue to see in a lot of different areas of this country here. So it's kind of the same thing when you look at Israel and the way that their systems are run. They already are meant to run in the benefit for Israeli citizens versus Israeli Palestinians. And there's a lot of Palestinians, when you look at like Gaza, they are not given citizenship. They're not looked at as citizens. They're looked at as refugees within their own country. So that's like the one thing that he says about the judiciary that I don't agree with, and I haven't been able to find any evidence to support what he's saying. But if I'm wrong, I'll be happy to be corrected. And I do also want to say he's trying to act like the Supreme Court within Israel is this wonderful thing, that they're extremely balanced and even, and that is, everything about that is categorically wrong. And I'm actually working on a video that should be coming out, if not tomorrow, definitely by this weekend, that is debunking this entire aspect of Israel not being an apartheid state, because Israel is an apartheid state. They meet all of the parameters of that. And one of those is related to the way that Palestinians are treated within the courts. And over like 95% of Palestinian cases are like, I'm trying to find it within my notes here, so I apologize, but it's like 95 to 97% of cases that go to the court that involve a Palestinian, nothing happens with them. There's never any type of reprimand that happens, especially if a crime has been committed against that Palestinian by an Israeli soldier or even by an Israeli Jewish citizen. So him trying to act like this Supreme Court is some, on high, wonderful thing is just kind of a load of BS.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. When I watched this clip earlier, I was like, I'm wondering if that's even true with the justices. So I'm glad that you brought that up and clarified that you're looking into that. And we can always add it into the notes if we do find something. Either way, and when you drop your new show, make sure we'll put the link to it down in the description here as well, so that way anyone watching after, you can follow up and watch the show that she's referencing. All right.
The electoral process, there's 1.9 million Palestinians in Israel who vote. They elect legislatures, are represented in the judiciary, and they can practice freedom of religion. It's the only place in the Mideast where they guarantee protection for gays. There was a pride parade 2 weeks ago in Israel with 150,000 people in Israel, in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. At the same time in Iran, they were hanging gays from cherry pickers. It's the only place where women have full rights. It's the only place where Palestinians can legally complain about their government with no fear of reprisal. So anywhere else, including the West Bank, if you complain about the extremely corrupt governments in the West Bank or Gaza, you risk your life, and you'll face torture and death. So the judiciary in Israel is unique in the world. It's also said you can't pressure people putting pressure on their family. You can't pressure terrorists in that way at all.
I have a feeling that happens all the time, though. I mean, again,
well, but you can go to jail for it.
But I'm not. You're right. But I'm not I'm not an expert.
Yeah, I mean, so I do want to just let people know almost everything that RFK Jr. is saying is very particular propaganda that is fed from the Israeli government to Israeli Jewish citizens. And it's part of why there is such kind of amped up animosity and tensions and hostilities between the Jews and the Palestinians within all of Palestine, not just in areas of the West Bank or the Gaza Strip or anything like that. I mean, this is just kind of an encompassing issue where Israelis are being extremely racist and prejudicial towards Palestinians. And that's why I find what he's saying here to just be, it's very dangerous rhetoric, in my opinion, because it's pushing such propaganda that there is very little to support what he is saying, and it's actually a lot of projection. This is a lot of what the Israeli government does to Palestinians.
Yeah.
Palestinians do suffer from a lot of pressure from the Israelis. That's both Israeli citizens and the Israeli military. And they use this term terrorist to say, oh, this Palestinian 15-year-old boy is a terrorist. And because he lives in this home with his entire family, we can now say that that home, that abode is a form of terrorist organizing, because they want to label this one particular Palestinian as a terrorist. And what do we know about labels? Labels are extremely convenient at getting people to cancel and to censor. That's what happens here in this country.
That's the protocol. Yeah, that's how the CIA works. That's how the State Department works.
Exactly. And that is exactly how the Israeli military works towards Palestinians. They use so much pressure.
It's virtually the same people doing the same things.
Like, you know what I mean? Like we're training the Israeli cops and you know, like vice versa. So
exactly.
Like it's really, you know, like it's a mirror image. And if you start to look at this and you look at how things happen in the United States, and you can say, wow, that's kind of reflective of that too.
And that projection.
Certain races are having that, you know, certain ethnicities have that same thing happen to them. And you can see that mirror image reflection.
That same projection that she was just mentioning that Kennedy is doing as using this rhetoric and saying these formalized narrative lines, like stuff that's easily debunked.
Mm-hmm.
He's just spewing this narrative because that's how they do it. That's what's effective. That's what wins elections. That's how you convince all the dumbasses to get in line and say, yeah, well, you know, Bobby Kennedy said this, so it must be true. You know, I understand why he's, you know.
And then they can, because it is propaganda,
nonsense.
They can go and do a Google search of those talking points, and they can get results of those talking points.
Exactly.
So it like cements in what RFK Jr.
Built-in
is
affirmation
saying.
and opposition. You got to have both sides of it.
It creates this exact narrative, and this is how they do it. This is exactly how they do it. So I know we're not even very far in. We have to stop because it's constant. This whole interview, I was like so mad when I was watching it. I was like,
well, he's lying so much, and the way that he's the rhetoric that he has around Iran is so Israeli lobby propaganda,
100%.
because they really want to push that. But I do also want to say, just before we get going, I'm sorry we have to pause so many times, but when he's talking about that in Israel, you know, that like gays and trans people have the most rights and stuff like that, that is actually steadily becoming untrue because of the judicial overhaul that's happening in Israel, which is actually something that I did cover on my channel a few months ago, because there have been several protests from Israeli citizens. These are Israeli Jewish citizens that do not like Netanyahu's far right-wing government because they are afraid of how it's going to affect these more like liberal policies that do help and support and promote gay rights and trans rights. And they're afraid that the far right-wing government is going to start moving backwards, which is actually, I think in some areas is already starting to be seen. So
I saw people getting hurt too at Pride events.
They're experiencing the violence that IDF soldiers give to Palestinians every day at these protests, which I can't help but be like, it's a tiny bit of karma, but at least now you're seeing what it's like to be a Palestinian.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Like when I saw it, I was like, and I'm like, I remember seeing it like just like a couple, I would say within the last couple of weeks. I was like, I'm like, wow, are they harming? And I didn't know if it was just because they were Palestinian people or Israeli, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know enough to like clarify it myself. But like looking back, I'm like, yeah, I know what they were talking about when they're saying like these pride events. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I saw people getting injured at pride events in that region. So like I was curious if what I was seeing was true or if it was propaganda. So you know, you never I don't know like until I can, you know, get some kind of information verified when it comes to a lot of it, just because I mean we know in our own country how much propaganda we are
surrounded.
You have to just presume that, you know, 85% or more is going to be a lie or some kind of spin on the truth. So like either way.
That's very true. All right, I'm going to play some more of this. Let me mute me.
Can sue people.
Right. Okay.
Oh,
so I get your defense of Israel.
So yeah, but I'm not, and you know, I'm not saying that I'm not going to oppose, and I'm co-signing, you know, every.
So
policy.
you don't mean unconditional?
No, I don't mean, and I mean unconditional, because we give $3.5 billion to Israel every year. Now we give $2.3 billion to Egypt, which, you know, has no human rights, and we give $1 billion to Jordan, which has no human rights, and we give $800 million a year to the Palestinian Authority, which uses that money to pay bounties to Palestinians who kill Jews, not government officials, but Jewish civilians. So if you go to Israel and if you kill a Jew anywhere in the world and you're a Palestinian, the Palestinian Authority will pay you money for that. And they will.
I don't know enough to push back on this.
So I know. I
have to push back on you because just so I don't look like I don't have a spine at all.
Yeah. So
I mean, you can tell by the look on Jimmy's face, he's a little dumbfounded by someone who's seemingly a pretty intelligent person.
Yeah.
Talking so much stupid.
It's like when you parked your car in the parking lot and there's one little spot on the end that's not quite big enough for another car to park in, and a guy comes and parks up on the sidewalk right next to your truck, and you're like, why did he? What the? And you're just like, oh damn, that's all of that, huh? And you know, that's kind of the look that Jimmy was giving RFK. Like really, you're gonna park right there with that?
He's like, you're fucking spewing some bullshit right to my face, dude.
It's like, bro, it
like
says
you're
no
in
parking.
my studio, you're in my house, and you're fucking straight up propaganda. Like you're spewing propaganda. Like you can just kind of see it, but he knows he's not in a position to actually push back on some of this because it's propaganda. And like, you know, like when you're trying to debunk propaganda, you have to know the actual counter to what they're saying. You have to know the truth.
Yeah.
You really be able to recognize it and to be able to call it out and not get just destroyed trying to call it out. So, I mean, he kind of set himself up in a bad position talking about this without having the actual information to back up, you know, like it's just, he didn't do his homework.
Yeah,
I wish Jimmy had done a little bit more, or maybe already had someone on that could, you know, maybe like Max or even like Aaron Mate in the background to be able to kind of rebut some of his comments. The one thing I do want to, you know, I as someone who looks at Palestine a lot and realizes that there is a lot of different, you know, viewpoints that people can have on Palestinians that are fighting for what they feel is their just right to exist, because that's kind of what a lot of Palestinians are feeling, is like they don't even have a right to exist, let alone be a citizen within the country with which they reside. And Max Blumenthal also brought this up as well, that like what RFK is saying about the suicide bombing and that they're going to pay. And then I think later on he talks about like streets being named after people.
He says that later in the interview.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that like those kinds of things didn't happen. They did. But that was, you know, well over 15 to 18 years ago that those kinds of things stopped. And the reason why and this is going to be controversial to probably some people, but the reason why Palestinians are doing what they're doing, whether you agree with them or not, and I don't condone terrorist actions and I don't condone taking the life of people in any regard. I'm very anti-war and I'm pro-peace. But I also understand that you cannot come into someone's home, come onto people's land that have been there for generations and expect them to just kind of bend over and take it. We don't expect Ukrainians to do that with Russia. So why do we expect that of Palestinians? And it's really convenient for the United States and the European nations to proclaim organizations like Hamas as terrorist organizations because of what they do. But the thing is that Palestinians do not have a standing army like the Israelis do. The Israelis have a standing military, and that military is fully funded by the United States, which RFK said they get over $3.5 billion a year. Right. And Israel has the most advanced weaponry radar systems and the Iron Dome. So the Palestinians, when they do and when they have done these terrorist acts, it's not just because they're terrorists and they want to kill Jews. It's because it is the only mode of resistance that they see for themselves, because doing nonviolent resistance hasn't done a lot for them over the years. That's why movements like BDS started as let's do a nonviolent way to resist, but even that gets shunned. And so it kind of leaves people with no option. So if Ukrainians get to be resistance fighters, Palestinians should be looked at as the same way. But because they get labeled terrorists, this is extremely convenient.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to mute.
I think there's this narrative, and particularly on the liberal left, that says that that portrays Israel as a kind of occupying nation sitting on a Palestinian land, and the whole thing is a lie from start to bottom. And let me just tell you a little bit about the history. Israel and Jordan were part of what was called the British Mandate when the Ottoman Empire, in 1922, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed after World War I, we went to war. The Palestinians were on the side of the Ottoman Empire against the Allies. The Jews were on our side. There were more Jews in Palestine at that time than there were Palestinians. But at the end, the Ottoman Empire disappears, and so there's a lot.
Did he just say there was more people in the land called what? Called Palestine?
So there was more Jews in Palestine than there were Palestinians.
Because the land is called what? It wasn't Israel, right?
Well, because at that time it was called Palestine.
Right.
Yeah, because that's...
And that was also at the time when being a Jew was not an ethnicity, it was a follower of Judaism. And this is something I'm still kind of struggling to somewhat understand, because this has happened since like I've grown up, in the early days, like in the early 90s and early 2000s. A Jew was someone that was a follower of Judaism. And lately it's turned into an ethnicity. So one of the things is like Jerusalem and Palestine was a holy land. There was a confluence of three different major religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So of course there's going to be a lot of Jews in Palestine because it's one of the three main religions that practice religion within the area.
Right.
So there were a lot of Jews, yes, but there weren't more Jews than Palestinians, to my understanding. That is something that he's conflating. He is.
I agree with that, because that's semantics at that point, right? Mm-hmm. Are you a Palestinian because you live in Palestine? Are you a Jew because you practice Judaism? like what is the divide there? You know what I mean? You're trying to blur the line between ethnicity and religion. That's what they're doing right there.
And I've argued with a lot of people over the years, not on YouTube, but like with, just like family and friends, where I'm like, this new, like over the last like 15, I would say 15, maybe 20 years, this shift from a Jew as a follower of Judaism to Jew as an ethnicity, I feel is a way to continue this anti-Semitic ballooning, so as to have more things be called anti-Semitic that aren't necessarily anti-Semitic, because they are saying, oh, this is my ethnicity and not I'm a follower of this religion.
Yeah.
And there's also Palestinian Jews too. Like,
of course,
this is today. Like I have members within my family that are Jewish. I have members within my family that are Muslim. So and also Christians, like, because they all came from this region and were Palestinians first, and then followers of whatever religion it was that they chose second.
Right.
And the clashing between Jews and Palestinians, or Jews and Muslims, it's not to say that it wasn't existing before the formation of Israel and things like that, but it has definitely been blown out of proportion in order to feed into the propaganda and the justification that Jews have more right to this land versus the Palestinians. And
it's crazy to think of. It seems it smacks of the same thing when people say, oh, you're transphobic if you're
anti-Semitic.
You're anti-Semitic. Now it's like you're saying, it has that same kind of feeling, because obviously it's Semitic people lived in Palestine as well. So what the fuck are you talking about? How can, you know what I mean? Like, how can you be anti-Semitic and Semitic at the same time?
Because people are terrified of these labels.
These
and
labels
it's the
are just
same,
insane.
It's the same thing that they do with people, that when they call people bigots, and then they call them transphobic or homophobic, or they call you this or that or every other name. And because no one wants to be labeled as those things, because then they come after your job, and they come after, you know what I mean? They label you as that. And then, they want everyone, to cancel you. And it's the same thing.
I remember back in the before times, there was a time where when someone called you something, it was because you represented something that you were. You know what I mean? Not just some conflated idea of something. You know what I mean? There's no teeth in it at all. It's just like
overused.
I know you are, but what am I? It's
all overused, and people are terrified of having something that's used and applied on them, because then once you get that label, once you get that, that black label of, oh, you're this or you're that, or you're racist or you're a bigot or you're a transphobe or you're anti-Semitic, like, it's the same playbook over and over again. And we need to be able to have these conversations and find out, like, okay, well, where is that line of offense? Where does it become an offensive thing, and where isn't it? And the only way we're going to find that out is by actually talking about it.
And that's why these labels are there convenient. Oh, you're anti-Semitic, so I'm just gonna cop out and not have this conversation.
Right.
Yeah, I don't talk to anti-Semites. And you're like, what? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a coward's way out when you're calling people different names and you're not like taking the time to talk to them and get to know them and see, like, well, why do you feel that way? Even if somebody is that, why do they feel that way? Like, it is worth trying to dig into that, because if you can find that out, maybe it's a misconception they have, and maybe that's the only way that someone's going to change their mind, is by actually talking to them.
Yeah. And because Devin, there was a comment I saw. Devin was like, aren't Palestinians Semitic? And that is true. Palestinians are Semitic people. So especially if you're trying to call like a Palestinian, I think Richard Medhurst talked about this in a video a long while back. He's like, people call me anti-Semitic. And he's like, I am Semitic. Like, what's up? And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
Exactly.
And absolutely. And I'm so glad we're here to like debunk like this. This is the only reason like I wanted to do a debunking video of RFK. It's not really the fact that it's Jimmy's show. It's just that RFK was on it. And because there's so much that he is going around saying, and he has a huge platform right now. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we need to give people like just a little bit of clarification as to what is really happening in this like clip. Oh my gosh. All right, I'm gonna mute.
A lot of land that is part of the Ottoman Empire. And the question is, what do you do with that land? Woodrow Wilson and the League of Nations said, what we're going to do is we're going to give it to whoever lives there. Whoever lives on that land now is the sovereign of their own country. Well, they took Palestine, and they said, there's half the people, a little over half are Jews, a little under half are Arabs. So we're going to cut it in two, and we're going to give half, part of the Jews, part of the Arabs. But there was so much anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic bigotry at that time that they gave 4/5 of it to the Arabs and 1/5 to the Jews, just a tiny sliver 9 miles across to the Jews, tiny, tiny little piece of land with their sacred sites that were not Muslim sacred sites ever. So, that's how.
I can't. It's just so much shit spewing from his face. So he's not correct in what he's saying. And when you're going into the history of like the Ottoman Empire and the Allied nations, yes, the Ottoman Empire was in decline at the start of World War I, and that was essentially what led to its decline. And part of the reason why the Ottoman Empire did have its ultimate decline was because the Allied nations worked their magic in getting the Arab nations to fight amongst each other. They were really successful at that, and they've continued to be really successful at keeping the Arab nations to, basically fight against brother against brother. There was land that was provided to the Jews following World War II and after the Holocaust. And the Palestinian people were actually pretty open to providing them with a safe haven because the Holy Land had been a safe haven for lots of different people at lots of different times. And during the Ottoman Empire ruled for a very long time. I believe it's between like 600 and 800 years, kind of depending on where you're looking at. And during that time, there was also like the Dark Ages that was going on in the European nations. And that was actually a safe haven for Jews in the Ottoman Empire. Because of their difference of religion, there was a little bit of like, I think it was like in relation to taxes, like the Jews might pay like a little bit more in taxes and things like that, just because of the way that the 5 pillars of faith in Islam work. There's a lot of donations that are given to the poor and things like that. But the Jews were given a safe haven place during the Ottoman Empire and also after its decline in Palestine. And I believe it was like between like 45 and maybe 80,000 Jews were provided with safe haven because of what had happened. But the Palestinians were not prepared for their borders, because it was their borders at the time, to just be completely opened to the Jewish settlers to come in and take over their land at the behest of the Allied nations that, yes, they had been fighting against. The way he talks about this, like, oh, how dare the Palestinians be on the opposing side? Well, of course they're going to be on the opposing side because they're fighting against what to them is an oppressive colonialist regime coming into their country, wanting to take things that they don't believe are theirs. We would do the same thing here if Russia came and invaded the East Coast.
Or Mexico decided,
Exactly.
oh, I'm taking back the land that you guys already took from us. Like, people don't realize that these borders have changed hands many times. And how far up what did it go, Steve? Like, it went into like California, right? Mexico.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, and so people.
Yeah, almost up to Washington.
Yeah, people forget that. Like, we've already, like, this is the same playbook. If you look at what the United States has done, this is the same type of thing. And we need to recognize that these patterns are happening. And if he's willing to ignore that it's happened here and that it's happening currently, and Palestinian people are being kicked out of their own homes and occupied, then what is he going to do? What do you think his foreign policy really? How would his foreign policy look?
Very
Really
pro-Israel.
Yeah, like, is this what people are really like okay with this? I don't know how. All right, I'm gonna mute and play some more. Let's see how far we can get.
That was the original distribution. And then in the 48 war, when Israel got its statehood, they were immediately attacked by by Egypt, Jordan, Syria, all the surrounding countries, and Lebanon, and miraculously beat them off. The Palestinians were on the side of the attackers. In all of those countries, all the Jews were expelled. So all of those countries expelled every Jew in the country and took away something like 27 million square miles of land that were just taken away from them. And those Jews were all sent to Israel. Israel did not do that to the Palestinians in Israel. It allowed them to stay. And then, it's
they allowed them to stay. Do you want me to stop or do you want me to keep going?
It's one of those things where I'm really trying to understand like what he's trying to say, because it's making it seem like any confrontation that the Arab world and Palestinians have had against I want to say Israelis, but I guess at that time it was the Jews, is horrific, horrendous, and can't be done. But when Israelis are doing it to Palestinians, it's because the Palestinians are terrorists and shame on them. I go back to if Russia was to invade the east coast of the United States, I don't think people would just be like, sure, take my house. That's cool.
No, we would not.
And it seems like that's what he's expecting. And again, it's the whole thing of like, yes, Palestine did provide some safe harbor for Jews following the Holocaust because of the atrocities that were committed against them during the Holocaust from the German Nazis.
And then what did they do? They are literally they just keep pushing and want more and more and more.
And that's the thing. He talks about this sliver of land that was provided to the Jews. And yes, that is true. There was this particular area of land where it would give them access to their holy sites and be able to practice their religion freely and all of those things. But to act like, because they've given this, now they need to give over everything. And that has been the constant rhetoric from like both main political parties and serious advocates for Israel, is acting like the Palestinians are the main aggressor in this situation. When you don't have a formalized military and you don't have billions of dollars being given to you from foreign countries, I don't think you're the aggressor in that situation. And when you respond to that aggression, the peak of hypocrisy, in my opinion, is acting like Palestinians, how dare they be responding to the aggression that they receive. I would expect nothing less from if someone was to be an intruder in someone's house. Like I would fully understand and expect you to want to be able to keep you and your family safe if someone is coming at you with a knife or a gun or something like that. Like, and that's where his rhetoric is so distant from the realities on the ground. It's obvious that he's never been to Palestine and spoken to Palestinians. He's never been to Gaza and spoken to Gazans and Gazan children and seen the atrocities that Gazan children are having to experience on a daily basis. he's just touting a lot of shit, and I don't like it.
I don't either, but I'm glad that you're, like, you're here to help, like, unpack this, because I mean, it's just like talking point after talking point. Like, he really has this down. Like, he really has these talking points down.
It's pretty obvious that someone is in his ear, or someone's. And I would just let people know, like, people don't like to think about it. When he's done such a 180, like he got called an anti-Semite and this is his response, it just kind of goes to kind of show who's got the power, who's got the influence, and why he's doing what he's doing. Because he's realizing that he has to do this. He's got to bend and kiss the ring of Israel. It's the why. Why do you want to do this? It's because they have so much influence and power in our system that, honestly, a foreign nation should not have on our government. If it was Russia, if it was China, we would be all up in arms, and there are issues within those areas as well. But it seems like Israel influence is approved, and everything else.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's really odd how that works. Like, Israel is fine.
Yeah.
It's been attacked. It was then attacked in 1967. And in that land, it was attacked, and it took land from its attackers. The Palestinians, again, were on the losing side. But it took strips of land from the attackers, which is the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, and the Golan Heights. And then Israel said, look, we want to give it all back. But we're not going to give it back because you can attack us from those parts. We're not going to give it back unless you promise us peace. If you renounce violence against us, if you admit that we have a right to exist, we'll give it back. Egypt said yes. And Syria got the Golan Heights and Sinai, and they got it back. Jordan wouldn't do it. Oh, and today you have, the Palestinian Authority, and in Gaza, if you kill a Jew, you get a street named after you. The children are taught from kindergarten that killing Jews is an act of patriotism. And 85% of those countries, people in those countries, when polled, believe that it's okay to kill civilian Jews, and that it's okay, and that Israel has no right to exist, and their purpose is to destroy Israel and to exterminate the Jewish people. Now, Israel, on the other hand, only deliberately attacks military targets. So civilians do get killed, but for example, in Jenin, in the recent battle over Jenin is a bomb factory. It's terrorist bomb factory. But Israel, unlike Russia, which when they have areas.
They're a prison. It's a terrorist.
He's got all the keywords down. To hit those like sensors in the people's brain that are listening to propaganda. No, they're just terrorists. They're just terrorists, and they don't ever hit civilian targets. And Jimmy kind of does debunk that, and he has that prepared at least a little bit further in the clip. But it's like, you're really he just makes it sound like just the people in Israel are just the victims. They are just 100% the victims here, and there's nothing else. That's it. And
yeah, he said a very similar thing with Rabbi Shmuley. So that was that conversation that he had that went viral as well, where he said that 100% of the people in Jenin are terrorists. And he's basically trying to say the same thing here. And he really kind of scoffs at the civilian casualties, but says that they only hit military targets. There's two things I want to say in regards to that. So in July of this year, so from July 3rd to the 4th, there was a 2-day operation from the Israeli government that went into the Israeli military, that did go into Jenin. And that 2-day operation left 12 people killed. So it's not that 12 terrorists were killed, it's 12 people that were killed. And that included 4 children, and another 140 were injured. And there are at least 3,500 Palestinian refugees because of that military operation that were forced to flee their homes, and over 1,000 homes in that camp that were damaged. And many of them are severely damaged, but those Palestinian civilians have decided to return to those homes because they really have nowhere else to go. So him trying to act like 100% of the people within Jenin are terrorists is completely false. There are women, there are children, and there are just everyday civilians. And then the other aspect where he's trying to say that Israel only attacks military operations. We have seen Israel attack press buildings. We have seen Israel attack press individuals, so members of the press. I mean, Shireen Abu Akleh is one of the most prominent examples of that. She was killed by a sniper in the head, even though she had a press jacket on. So it's the Israeli military is pretty much completely hostile against any Palestinian. It really doesn't matter whether they are a so-called terrorist or not. And the Israeli military and the Israeli government, just like with labeling people as terrorists, they can very conveniently label any warehouse, any building, any home as terrorist organizations or terrorist dealings, so that they can either demolish the home, attack the home, or take the home by force the people that live in that residence to leave, and then take that home, and then they give that home to Israeli Jews. So it's one of those things where, like, if someone was to come to your house, pull you out of it, and say, this is now for someone else because we deem you to be what we label you. I mean, it's one of those, like, are you going to take that sitting down and lying down? I don't think so. And it's the level of depravity that the Israeli military has against the Palestinians, which is why so many people and organizations and other countries say that Israel is an apartheid state because of the disparity in treatment that they give to Palestinians versus the Israeli Jewish citizens.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to mute.
Areas like that in Chechnya or the United States and Iraq, we bomb the whole neighborhood because, we're not going to send troops in there who are going to die protecting people.
You're saying Israel does. I know I've covered stories where they bombed schools.
Well, but not
what are you
never,
talking about?
never deliberately.
Oh, yes.
Oh, in war, listen.
Yes,
war,
that's not true.
Yeah, it is. Israel,
Of course
the
it's
idea,
true.
listen, the IDF, Colonel Camp was one of the top military experts in the world.
I've covered these
said,
stories.
Well, I understand. And maybe somebody, I'm saying it's a policy. Of course, in war, stuff happens. And you may have individuals who kill a reporter.
Wow.
This drove me crazy because he just starts keep repeating, oh, well, there's a policy, like as if a policy is going to stop people that want to do these things to people. Really? A policy? If there's a policy, is that how it works? A policy just stops everybody from doing anything that they're not supposed to? And you could just see like Jimmy's face. He's just like,
yeah. Mm-hmm. He's pretty dumbfounded, you can tell.
Yeah, I would be.
Yeah.
I would absolutely be.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go back to it. I was just like, oh my gosh, I couldn't, when he kept saying it was a policy and how he's going to make excuses, exactly what you just debunked, how they label it as terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly the same thing.
Who do something like that, but the policy of the Israeli military is always only to attack military targets. Now, of course, that doesn't always happen, but let me tell you this. The politics, the military policy of every one of the surrounding nations and of Gaza and of the West Bank is not to attack military targets. It's to attack individual civilian Jews. That is the target.
Okay.
And it's the opposite of what Israel
So
does.
let me. So
and by the way,
well,
the
here
$3.5 billion that we give to Israel was part of the Tava and Camp David peace agreement. So we said, okay, we're going to contribute to this peace agreement, I'm making these payments, to Israel. That was our part in it. And that was our promise. And, we get a lot for that money. So anyway, I could talk about it a long
I know.
time.
So let me I have to push back on you a little bit on that.
I'm happy to. I'm happy for the opportunity to explain my position.
So here you're talking about how they inside the hospital premises, Israeli military rained down tear gas and bombs. That's there. They also use.
Well, yeah, but this is Jenin. Now in Jenin,
you're talking about.
In Jenin, you're looking at Jenin here. Not a single civilian died, and the IDF risked lives to go in there and do door-to-door.
But they did use. But they also did bomb it. They also.
But the terror. Listen,
right with jets, with military jets, they did.
No, but nobody died. The terrorists are put deliberately with the bomb facilities in hospitals or near them or near schools in order to, for
the amount of excuses that he comes up with. Oh, but nobody died. But how many people died as a result of a hospital being bombed? Oh, and They put the people purposefully there. Well, so that's an excuse. Like, it's an excuse. Like, he just keeps going on with more and more excuses.
Yeah, and he keeps feeding into this narrative that Jenin is 100% filled with terrorists, and that the Israeli military is only trying to attack, so-called military or terrorist organizations and activities, and then they put their soldiers on the ground to go door to door. The Israeli military already does shit like that in hundreds of places within Palestine, because that's how they do some of their most fear-mongering, aggressive tactics. Children are suffering all over Palestine. And it's because of things like this, because they live in a severely traumatic and hostile environment that they did not choose for themselves. And children are, like, specifically children in Gaza is something that I covered last year around this time. It's like 1 in 3 Palestinian children in Gaza contemplate suicide. And these are really young children that range from like 8 years old to about 13, 14 years old. And caregivers are dealing with the same thing. Parents are dealing with the same thing. Everyone is dealing with really serious mental health crises because of the situation that's happening. And that's one of the things that he seems to just kind of be conveniently not wanting to be like, this is where I wish Jimmy had some of this stuff so that he could rebut what RFK is saying. Because regardless of whether you agree with Israel or Palestine, it's the children that are suffering. And I would say on both sides of this, both Jewish children and Palestinian children are suffering, and they're in an environment that's extremely hostile. And children are not born to be racist. They are not born to be segregationists. They're not born to be apartheidists. They are born to learn and to grow. And one of the most really devastating things that I learned about Gazan children is that they just want to be able to go to school safely. And they want to be able to use that education and go to university and to have jobs. And that's something that they already, in their very young teens, are already experiencing as, maybe I won't even wake up tomorrow. And this is the reality for so many Palestinians, not just children, but Palestinians in general. They're just like, I don't even know if I will be at that dinner table with my family tomorrow. And there's entire families that have been wiped out. There's like one sole survivor, one child that will live when Israel bombs their homes. So the way that he's acting and pushing this off to sound so separate from the reality, the lack of empathy,
the policy. It's about the policy as opposed to having actual empathy for the people that are directly affected by this. I mean, like, I can't imagine. And we know that trauma gets passed on through our DNA. So these children are, if they do grow up to be old enough, because I mean the population is, I mean, like there's mostly very young people, and they're getting, the Palestinian people are being wiped out, and it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. So if they do grow up, they're growing up in trauma, and they're going to pass that on, and it's going to keep, that cycle going.
That's very true. There's something I follow a few different Palestine organizations and just like promoters of the Palestine situation on Instagram. And one of the most common things that I see that breaks my heart every single time is showing Palestinian mothers. And it's like a meme that's been started saying that Palestinian mothers carry their children, predominantly their sons, twice. They carry them in the womb, and then they carry them at the end of their life. And it's one of those things that's sadly really true. And the reality is that Palestinians are, like, especially young Palestinian men, are very prone to being killed by the Israeli military because that's who they want to target. And if you look at some of the extreme views, so the very far right-wing members within the Israeli government that want to just completely decimate all of the Palestinians. They basically want to genocide the Palestinians. And that is rhetoric that gets fed into the Israeli military. And one of the things that I'm going to be showing on my video that's going to be coming out soon is there were members within the IDF that made shirts because they were snipers, and it showed a pregnant Palestinian woman, and it said 1 shot, 2 kills. And this is something this was back in like 2014. But if we're going to act like this isn't something that's still within the ethos, the way that they think, it's like, I'm sorry, but you're sadly mistaken. This is something that they purposely do, that they're purposely wanting to kill pregnant Palestinian women and young Palestinian men. It's so that they can do the harshest of harsh things that they can do, which is to cleanse the area and the region of Palestinians, which is just so ironic because that's what was that's what the whole Holocaust was about, was that the Jews were suffering from Nazi Germans. And, we look at things like Auschwitz and the horrible crimes that were committed against the Jews. They did deserve a safe place to go. They deserved to be saved. And I can say that as someone who is half Palestinian and whose father is a Palestinian refugee. Like, my father was born in 1946. So by 1948, he was a refugee. He was a baby and a refugee within his own country, and his family lost everything. So I have the passion, I have the rage, and I have the anger that comes from that generational trauma that my father passed down to me. But I am in no way going to act like Jews did not suffer under the Nazi regime, because they did. But when I see this kind of rhetoric, when I see the indiscriminate actions that are going against Palestinians from the Israeli military, I cannot help but see the hypocrisy in this, because while they're not being thrown in gas chambers, it's not too far from that. We're not too far from that. And it's a radical thing to say, and I apologize to anyone I'm offending. But the reality is that this is what Palestinians experience, and this is how Palestinians feel. And Palestinians are so often conveniently left out of these conversations. I appreciate that someone like Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate and Katie Harper are going to talk about these issues from the Jewish perspective. I appreciate that. But I want to see, and I hope to see, more Palestinian voices, more Arab voices that can come with more understanding and connection to this. And it seems like we are almost always conveniently left out of the conversation because it's too close, and they don't want to hear the anger and rage that we can have when we bring this up, because they want to throw epithets at us like, oh, you're anti-Semitic. And it's like, absolutely not. I can acknowledge what has happened to the Jews and the atrocities that were committed against them, but I will not act like the same thing isn't happening to Palestinians, because these are my people. This is my family. My father experienced so much oppression to the point where he had to leave. Like, it's why he had to leave that country, because as a young man, he was going to be targeted and threatened. And it was like, he didn't want to raise a family there. And I don't blame him. So sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent, but
no, this is why I had you on to talk about it. This is exactly why I was like, we need to have this conversation and have the long form conversation about this. This is exactly why.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think that this is really important. And I think that your words are very powerful and you're very articulate in how you say them. And, you're very intentional in how you say them. And that really matters because it shows how well educated you are on this and how much passion that you have for this. It's not just a fly by night thing. It's not just like, a casual thing for you. And that's why I was like, I need to have her on because it's really important. You can talk on this in a way that I can't talk about it. I can't give this context in the same way because I'm not Palestinian. That's exactly what we do here, is to have the conversations with the people that, so they can talk about it from their perspective and give you the opportunity. It's exactly why we do it.
And thank you so much for providing the platform. I really do. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate having you here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna mute us again and bring this back.
That is a deliberate military strategy by them.
I'm the worst. I'm the least informed guy to push back on you on this, right? But I have to try a little. So let me do one more. So here is the Israeli occupation pours cement into the water springs at the El Hira area south of Hebron to block and prevent Palestinians from using their water in agriculture. So we don't have to play it. It's all right.
Yeah.
So that's happening.
And I don't know enough about that, Jimmy, to be able to, address it.
So let's do one more. Here's from Max Blumenthal. He says, Israel's apartheid army leveled Sharuk Tower today in Gaza City. I remember doing some interviews there a few years ago after climbing close to a dozen flights during a blackout. It's home to many media offices, which is precisely why it was targeted. And that was a major residential tower in Israel bombed in Gaza. And there was a bunch of middle class families that lived there. So let's watch this. So there it is.
You know what?
So that's not going door to door. And then here is Israel forces forcibly expelled a Palestinian family and demolished their home. So if you say that they're all, it sounds like you're saying all the Palestinians are terrorists. But listen, and there's collective
the Israel Supreme Court has said that Israel has a policy that if a facility is used by terrorists, a home, that they can plow into the home. That's a policy. That is a military policy, but they don't kill the people in the home deliberately. And I think that's if you have limited objectives and they're proportional, that sounds proportional to me. Now, in terms of
they blew up the fucking building, Bobby.
Yeah, you blow up the building, and that's proportional to you?
Jesus.
That is proportional?
But the Israeli lobby told me to say this, so I've got to say it.
But they have a policy.
It's a policy. Everybody follows
They have
policy,
a policy.
right? Nobody didn't ever not follow a policy and just bomb the shit out of a building they felt like bombing, right? That's never happened. What a fucking...
Yeah, it's like we say we have policies to not be racist in this country, but there's still racism. Like,
right.
We have policies for our police to follow protocol. They don't follow protocol. Policies mean jack shit.
Yeah, it's words on paper that you can point to and say, but we have a policy.
It's like to say
we're bombing them.
To act like he's somehow not full on establishment, dyed in the wool, 100% establishment person. And people are like, he's anti-establishment. He's a threat to the... No, he's 100% establishment with a pedigree. That's what RFK is.
Yeah, and I called this out early on. I called it out. I was like, he's going to be like the new Bernie. Like, he's really going to be like the new Bernie. This is going to be the same fucking bullshit. And I called it out, and I got dogpiled on fucking Twitter. People were pissed that I said it. Well, guess what? I'm not being proven wrong. Okay.
And when he loses the primary and says, "Oh, you got to vote for my buddy Joe."
Yeah, he told everyone to vote for his good friend Joe Biden, like last time. I'm pretty sure, didn't he? Same thing with Cornel West. They both they've all done it. So we need to stop pretending like we're getting anywhere and like we're actually not having deja vu every 3 years with the same political football with the same pundits, the same talking heads, whether it's independent media or on the big, MSM. The same thing is happening.
Mhm.
They're echoing around the same kind of people.
Always.
Always the
It never
same
changes.
thing. All right, let's get back to this.
Cycle.
Steve was like, this is like the longest 29-minute video ever. I'm like, I know, because it's so bad. Because RFK is just like nonstop, just like bad point after bad point after bad point.
Spewing
Like,
nonsense.
it's all awful.
Yeah, he
All right.
needs the barf emoji in front of his face.
Yes. Yes.
I know, right?
Damn.
That tower in Gaza, I would love to research that, which I will do.
Okay.
And find out what the justification. And I love Max Blumenthal, but I do not think he's objective on Israel. I think his reporting on Israel is not it needs to be questioned.
Okay. Well, here's what I would ask. Just like, Peter Hotez ducked you and Joe Rogan, I would love, because Max is the guy to talk to about this, not me. So would you do an interview with Max, because he would be able to talk to you about this way better than I can. I'm really not good at this.
Yeah, I would love to talk to Max.
Yeah, I mean, Max is a great guy. He's an honest.
Unmute.
I wonder, I really wonder
have-
what was going on his phone at that time, because it looks like he was looking at his phone.
Yep.
And I'll tell you guys, we have the proof of what happened, because this was like a day ago. So the day after RFK agreed to Jimmy Dore's proposal to publicly discuss his pledge of unconditional support of Israel with Max, this is a Twitter thread. We can show it after. His comms director was dialing me up to offer a series of unbelievable excuses as to why this could not happen in the foreseeable future. So, as soon as RFK says, yes, I'll do it, the next day, his comms person is telling Max Blumenthal that no, they can't. So I just want to let everybody know that. And I have the actual Twitter thread, and we can show it after we're done with the video. Hey, Dingo.
Honest, he's a straight shooter.
Oh, whoops.
And so here, these can't all be terrorists, right? And they're
no.
turn it all the way down.
Yeah, well, like I said, Israel has a policy that if a home is used for terrorist activity, that they plow it under. It's not a great policy, because what happens immediately is that the government of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza immediately pay to rebuild the home. I don't think it's effective, but I think it's proportional. Yeah, I think it's likely to discourage terrorism. Terrorism means the murders of Jews. It doesn't mean attacking a military target. And that is the objective. Let's kill as many individual Jews as possible. And that's, that's just wrong. And we are subsidizing, they have this whole program called the Play to Slay, or Pay to Slay. If you kill a Jew, you're taken care of for life. If you go to prison, you're paid a salary while you're in prison, and your family is taken care of. And it's, I don't think we should be paying for that.
So I know. So you don't agree that Israel is an apartheid state, even
not at all.
But doesn't pretty much every human rights organization say it is?
Yeah, but
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Jesus Christ!
It took him so much to get him to just yes, it was very reluctant. Honest, yes, everybody says that yes, it is a terrorist organization, but he just refuses to acknowledge it. And now he's going to give you guys excuses as to why.
Yeah, it's like, where to even start? I mean, him acting like Israel is not an apartheid state when so many different organizations and the United Nations have said that it does fall under the confines of an apartheid because of the disparity in treatment. This is where I'm like, this is a guy that in some areas I agree with him, and he's pretty intellectual, he's fairly well educated and knows quite a bit. And for someone who's very like seemingly pro science, like follow the science where it leads and you know, look at studies and all of that, it's like, then where is that same mindset
Yeah.
when it comes to Palestine and the situation that's going on there?
That's the
It's-
problem with the shit libbery. When you
Yeah.
are a shit lib, you simply point out other people's propaganda that's convenient for you and
Mhm.
ignore the stuff that's inconvenient for you to accept or admit is also propaganda. And that's how it works. It's just a, you know, it's a little dance between, well, that's not real and that's not real, but you know, but this is real, Bobby. You don't have the wherewithal to actually read about a zillion published things about that conflate that conflict with everything that you're saying. It's
Yeah.
like, how do you just turn a blind eye to that? That's not someone who's informed on this. He's being told what to say.
And
Yeah.
that's what makes him as a candidate for presidency really kind of scary. We already know
Yes.
that these establishment Democrats have strings
Exactly.
being pulled. And I would say anyone going up for a presidential candidacy has got some strings being pulled somewhere.
100%. The entire thing is an orchestrated event. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
There's no surprise in this. The only people that are surprised are the people that think it's actually a valid thing and it's not just writing a letter to Santa Claus. You know, those are the people that are surprised every 4 years and they get sucked back into the most important election of their life.
Yeah.
Every 4
time.
years, man, since I was paying attention and looking forward to voting when I can remember being 16 going, wow, this is holy crap. I'm trying to learn as much as I could about everything that already happened and believing all the bullshit Cold War fucking nonsense. Like, oh my God, you have to like learn a bunch of stuff and then realize that at least 70% of what you picked up along the way is just narrative. And you have to actually slice off all that narrative. That's like the fat on the outside of the good part of the meat. You know what I mean? It's like, it's insane. It's
Exactly.
just crazy.
And you cannot get people to go to war without a level of propaganda and misinformation. That's how you have to do that. And unfortunately, for us here in the United States, we've been fed so much propaganda for pretty much since like television and media became so prominent amongst everyone.
Since the start of TV, it's been a
Yeah.
more and more refined thing as it progressed from the days of radio onward.
It's called programming for a reason.
Yep. They live.
Exactly. It is called programming for a reason.
All right, I'm gonna mute us. I swear we're gonna get through this. I swear we will. But it's really good to be able to debunk a lot of like, what was said and really, like pick apart what RFK is saying, because that's exactly why we're watching it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so
Yes.
That's
why aren't they saying that? Why do those same organizations not criticize the killing of gays in Iran and all of these other Arab countries?
They don't.
They know. Israel last year had more condemnation by the UN official resolutions than all nations combined, more than Myanmar, more than China, more than any other nation. Everybody is signaling out Jews, and I would say that's anti-Semitism. What I say, and I do not believe that criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism. I don't co-sign, for Netanyahu or Likud. But if you are leveling criticism without leveling the same criticism about people who are doing much worse things, then the question is, why not? That has to be anti-Semitism. There's no problem criticizing Israel, but applying a different standard to Israel than you used to apply to any other country in the world is anti-Semitism.
Would you agree that Gaza is an open-air prison?
Well, I would say that Gaza, that I don't think, listen, Gaza is self-rule, right? Gaza is self-rule. It's not occupied. It's self-rule.
Well, they don't
So-
have freedom of movement.
Well, they
If that makes it a prison.
why doesn't Jordan open up Jordan to the Palestinians?
I'm not
Why?
smart enough to answer that.
Okay,
I don't
so
know.
Because Jordan is not Palestine. They are two different locations.
Geography is fun.
Say that
Yeah.
again. It was muted.
And why should they have to go to Jordan? They shouldn't have to go to Jordan in order to feel safe and protected. And Jordan already has a refugee crisis because of this shit. Like, they have so many different refugees coming into their country. The reason why places like Egypt, Jordan, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the other, Lebanon. It's like the reason why these three countries are struggling so much is because they do have so many different refugees coming from not just places like Palestine, but they've also got millions of people coming from areas of Africa that are being completely decimated because of the actions from the United States and European nations and the UK, because of the endless wars and famine and drought and their inability to have any level of agency within the countries that they live in. They have so little choice in the matter, and they're trying to save themselves and their families. Yet he's trying to act like Israel is some, poor Israel. They have no agency. They have the most agency of any country within the Middle East because they're being funded by everyone that doesn't live in the Middle East. Like, because the US and the allied nations like Europe and the UK, they need Israel because Israel is wanting to expand more from what they've already done. And there's also the fact that Israel, Jerusalem, where Palestine is located, there is a plethora of resources and connections. I mean, it's not called the Holy Land just for shits and giggles. There's a lot there. There's a lot of history there. There's also a lot of history when you look in countries like Egypt and Yemen and Syria and Libya and Sudan. All of these different places have been the birthplace of lots of different things, and there's so much resources to be had in that area, which is why countries like the United States have to do their never-ending war policies so that they can get the resources and take them from the citizens of those countries, turn them into refugees, and then critique the countries that have the refugees there because it's like, oh, they don't have good human rights in Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
He's so full of shit.
I know, but that's why I was like, wow, I just couldn't believe that we already had it on the books to talk about, like Palestine and what's happening there, and then this just like felt, and I was like, oh my gosh, people are really in a buzz about this interview. I'm like, maybe we should look at it, and I looked at it, and I'm like, oh, I think we're gonna have to do a reaction to this because it's just jam-packed. I mean, like, this whole thing is just jam-packed with a bunch of propaganda, and I'm like, we need to do this. But yes, I'm gonna mute again and let us play this some more.
But I do know that you can't bomb a
what
prison.
Israel has said is, we will give, we don't want to be anywhere near Gaza. Make an agreement that our country has a right to exist. Make an agreement that you will stop killing Jews, that you will stop telling your children to kill Jews. You stop naming streets and stadiums after Jew killers. Do that, make us feel safe, and we'll give you, the two-state solution. That's what they've been saying for 60 years. Prince Bandar, who was
Okay, I just want to point out that he keeps saying in this interview, make us feel safe. Make us feel safe. Bend over backwards for us. And he's saying it as if it's him, as if that is his, his home that he's talking about. Do you notice that? Like, he really is hitting it home as if it's his home, his safety, his family's not safe, over and over again.
Maybe because they're not.
Maybe they won't be if he doesn't say that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
maybe. I'm just, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. He's doing a lot of signaling in a way that looks like, okay, why are you doing this? Like, you're going really hard. You don't have to go this hard, but you're going really hard for it. So why?
Yep, so there's a slight echo. Is that on me? This one time? Is it this one?
Yep. Pull it down.
But yeah, it definitely feels like he's scared that censorship hearing where it was on the censorship and then he gets censored and stuff. Like, I feel like he's pretty...
Yeah.
I feel like he's having to make all of these bold statements to show that he is going to do what he needs to do in order to support Israel and pretty much anything that they want to do. And that's a scary thing, in my opinion, because like I said earlier, you know, like, we've seen establishment Democrats talk about their support for Israel and a two-state solution, like kind of the generic talking points.
Yeah.
But this is a guy who's using very specific rhetoric, very specific messaging and keywords, like you said. And it's like, why? Why are you using all of these specific terminology unless someone is telling you to say this? And the fact that you're letting someone make you say this shows you shouldn't be the president. Like, none of our presidents that we've had should have been presidents.
It just shows that and people overlooking that, and people overlooking those points right there that we're making about this and his behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If people are overlooking that, why are they overlooking that? Because to me, it's really blatantly obvious, especially in this interview. And when I watched it earlier just by myself, I was just like, why does he keep saying he wants to feel safe? He wants to feel safe over and over again. It just seems like, you know, he's reflecting on something. I can only assume.
Yeah.
It's weird though. All right, I'm gonna mute again.
The referee in the Camp David Accords, and Ehud Barak offered the Palestinians everything they wanted, including giving them the entire West Bank, plus like 97% of the West Bank, plus 3% of Israel to make up for the 3% it was keeping. And Yasser Arafat, in the end, and everybody agreed this, Yasser Arafat simply said he wouldn't negotiate. Prince Bandar, all of the people involved in that, Clinton, etc., all said it was completely Yasser Arafat's fault that they, and by the way, that there was no negotiation. Yasser Arafat would not negotiate. But for 60 years, the Israelis have been trying to negotiate, and nobody will negotiate. The leadership is bad leadership. Yasser Arafat sold $1 billion from his people. He died a billionaire. His wife is a billionaire. Mahmoud Abbas has $800 or $700 million. Oh, you know, and by the way, after the Oslo Accords, the Oslo Accords gave a right of return to the Palestinians. So any Palestinian in Israel, 1.9 million Palestinians, were allowed to return, and they would be given free land and a farm place in the West Bank. And it was expected that hundreds of thousands, they could live under their own country there. It was expected hundreds of thousands of people would take that offer. You know how many did? 4,000. Why is that? Because nobody wants to live under the Palestinian Authority, because they torture people. There's no justice system. They kill you if they don't agree with you. And it's a dictatorship, and it's a kleptocracy. They steal everything. They stole $1 billion from their people.
I apologize.
I didn't know if there was anything there that you wanted to clarify with any of that. Packs so much into.
He really does. That's where it feels very intentional. I can't say for sure, like with, you know, statistics and stuff like that, when it comes to the right of return for Palestinians. I can say kind of anecdotally, part of the reason why people that left Palestine that still have not returned to Palestine is because of the treatment that they receive when they go back. it's extremely forceful and very hostile. And that, I mean, that pretty much like starts at the airport. And this is something that, you know, my father experienced anytime that he's gone back to see his family. And unfortunately, it's gotten to the point where like he doesn't think he's going to go back because of what he experiences at the airports and then at the checkpoints and things like that. And the way he's trying to act like, you know, it's just this nonchalant, like, oh, they could have returned, but only 4,000 came. It really is reductive. It doesn't go into the serious aspects of how Palestinians are treated within this country that's not being run by them. And then the way that he's talking about like the Palestinian Authority, I'm not going to say the Palestinian Authority is great. There's a lot that can be critiqued about the Palestinian Authority, but they also don't have a lot of agency. They can't really protect the citizens, which is why that role has kind of been more with Hamas. And, you know, I'm not saying I'm a Hamas supporter, but it's like I'm a Hamas understander. It's like I understand why Hamas exists because the Palestinian Authority is not able to protect the citizens the way that they maybe want to or would like to. And then there's also the aspect of like, just like here in our politics, you know, like we have progressives in so-called progressives on the Democratic side that espouse all of these different, you know, rhetoric points, you know, so like they want more diversity. They don't want gerrymandering. They want, you know, one vote to actually count and all of those things, but they don't really do anything with the power when they have it. And the same can be said for the Palestinian Authority. And a lot of times when it comes to negotiations that are done between Israel and Palestinians, the Palestinians get kneecapped from the very beginning, and they're not really able to bring anything because they don't have any cards on the table that they can play that the rest of the international world sees as valid. And that comes from the fact that they don't have an official standing army that people would recognize as an army. So then therefore anyone that's fighting on the side of Palestinians is looked at as a hostile terrorist aggressor. And then it leads to this wishy-washy shit that he's trying to act like, oh, Israel's trying to negotiate in good faith. They're not trying to negotiate in good faith with Palestinians. That's complete bullshit. And the whole reason why Yasser Arafat was not agreeing to those things was because he saw what was going on and that so much of the debt, you know, like who was going to have to pay the price for things was going to be more on the Palestinian side than the Israeli side, when the Israelis have the power and the money and the control that's been given to them from these foreign nations. And he's also in a country that's not his own, trying to have these types of conversations. I'm not saying Yasser Arafat was, you know, super great. There's a lot you can critique, but we can do the same thing here. We have billionaires that shouldn't just be billionaires. And the way he's just trying to act like that's a reason to dislike the Palestinian resistance or side is just, he's so uninformed in an area where he's trying to act like he really knows what he's talking about. And it's sad.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. It feels like he's been fed his talking points and he doesn't really have any like knowledge of
Actual opinion.
Yeah. Like he's just repeating something. He's repeating propaganda. All right, let me mute.
Apologize. I have no idea how to push back on you on that. But I just want so you would say, let me ask you one more question about this. Like I think if you could just anyway. You said Wasserman Schultz has not only refused to condemn the over anti-Semitic rhetoric of Rashid Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, but she supported Omar's appointment to the Foreign Relations Committee despite Omar's advocacy of a boycott of Israel. Omar used that platform to issue regular libels against Israel and Jews that include references to Jews and their Benjamins. I won't be lecturing. So when I see that, it's like, oh, well, people call you anti-Semitic incorrectly all the time. And it's just, why wouldn't you be more hesitant? Aren't you doing the same thing here that people do to you?
No, I'm not, because I never said anything anti-Semitic. If she was criticizing Israel, that is not anti-Semitism. Everybody has a right to criticize Israel, just like it's an imperfect democracy. The only democracy in the Mideast, but it's an imperfect democracy, just like we are. and people ought to criticize it. But if you're applying a different set of standards to Israel than you are every other country, if you let every other country slide on human rights abuses and I mean, every country in the Mideast, an apartheid state, they don't let Jews live there. They don't let Jews hold office. They don't let Jews into their
Jews
legislature.
live in Iran. There's
Iran.
temples in Iran.
But there's nobody in political office. It's apartheid.
Oh, okay.
Okay, why aren't they all apartheid? They're apartheid against Jews. The Jews let Palestinians, if Israel allows Palestinians to vote, allow them to hold political office, they have the same rights as other Israelis. They even have more rights because they can visit the Temple Mount, and Israelis are not allowed to. They serve on the courts. They participate in the democracy. It's the only place in the Mideast where you can practice freedom of religion, where women have rights, where gays have rights, where there's real democracy. And why is she calling that Israel an apartheid state and not saying Jordan, Syria, Egypt, Iran?
So if she did that, you would go, okay, Israel's an apartheid state?
Of course. If she's saying that all of them are apartheid state, that's fine. But if she only says Israel's an apartheid state, that's anti-Semitism. And calling, talking about Israel's and their Benjamins, that's a little sketchy when you say.
So I just aren't you?
So yeah, there was a lot there, but I'm just.
That's propaganda. I mean, that's a propaganda talking point. I can't say for certain that, Jews aren't part of the, political offices and stuff within Iran. I'm not an expert of Iranian politics, but I do feel like a lot of what he said there is bullshit. And it feels like that's, going back to someone's telling him to say this. And I would just remind people that, the definition of apartheid as defined by Cambridge Dictionary, which I'm talking about in my video coming up tomorrow, is this took place in South Africa, and it was a system under which people of different races were kept separate by law, and white people were given more political rights and educational and other advantages. And it's a system of keeping groups of people separate and treating them differently, especially when this results in disadvantage for one group. I wouldn't say that apartheid is the way that it's defined would work in Iran or in these other Middle Eastern countries that he's trying to say are apartheid. But you can say that that is what is happening in Israel with Palestinians because of a place like Gaza. They are citizens within the country, but they are not allowed to basically act as a citizen. They do not have rights. They do not have freedom of movement, and they do not vote. If they were able to vote, that's the problem. If they were able to vote, then the way that the Israeli government looks would be completely different, which is why they cannot allow them to be a full-fledged citizen with all of the rights and responsibilities that would come with. And the fact that he's trying to say that Israel is the only democracy within the Middle East, that's not a democracy where you're forcibly keeping people in an open air prison, which Gaza is defined as that. Like, that is how so many different international organizations define Gaza, as an open air prison. Mm-hmm. But by denying them any level of agency and citizenry, that is segregation, that is apartheid. And also the fact that there's roads for Jews, Israeli Jews, and there's roads for Palestinians. At all of these different checkpoints, Palestinians are treated completely different than they are if they are an Israeli citizen. And this is where he is so uninformed, pushing propaganda. And I get that people like him and like some of the things that he says and things that he stands for and stuff. And I get that. And if they want to vote for him, go right ahead. But don't be surprised when people don't want to support this person because of this situation, because it's such a glaringly obvious area of it's not just naivete, it's you're purposely not looking at this issue fully because you're being told not to. And
So
if
what
that's
else
what
will
you're
you do
doing
that
now,
what else will you turn your back on as
exactly.
well? What other issues will they be able to persuade you to do this with?
Exactly.
Just really, really think about it, people. Really think about it.
You afraid? Because it breaks my heart in a bit, because it's so great to have a peace candidate, someone who tells the truth about the military industrial complex. No one does that. And you're right about Ukraine, and you're wrong about Russiagate, which led to Ukraine, but you got right about Russiagate, which is a big deal. And when a dummy like me can see it on day one, what Russiagate was.
Yeah, I didn't say that, but I wasn't paying attention to it. I
was.
Right, you were.
Because I
and
saw
you're
where
really
it was
smart
gonna
about a
go.
lot of stuff, so you see it.
And they got
Actually,
their war.
what happened to me is I never looked into it. I just, I was taking the narrative from the mainstream media and just that was it. And then I had dinner one night with Oliver Stone and with his son Sean, and the subject came up, and they pushed back hard, and that's when I thought, oh, okay, I better look into this, and that's when my eyes started opening to Russiagate. So I was, it was, I never had any reason to question it.
Mm-hmm.
Your voice on it, is you have to be reading.
So I thought that right here, it kind of shows that he admits that even with Russiagate, he wasn't paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of spills his own beans right here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've gotten, caught up in other PSYOP stuff, and I'm smart on other things, but yeah, that got me. Okay. So
but he's fully right on
admitting.
Israel.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't question the mainstream narrative on Israel. So if he did, he'd listen to maybe who? Max Aramate, understand, or Richard Medhurst, understand actual things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, no, I don't. I just, I missed the boat on that whole thing because I didn't have any reason to question MSM. What are you saying, dude?
So yeah, I mean, it's really a disservice that I wish that Jimmy had more, had somebody else there to help push back on this.
Mm-hmm.
Had just known what the points were, because there was other interviews. There could have been a brush up on some of the some of the stuff where it could be debunked. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that he will probably do follow-up shows to debunk what what he needs to debunk with Max and stuff like that. And that's kind of how this whole system works, right? Everybody, you have an interview, the person gets away with saying a bunch of stuff, it stirs a bunch of people up. A bunch of people want to do reactionary videos like this, like we're doing, to debunk the video, and then he has somebody on that corrects the video, and then the cycle continues. And that is something that I do notice a lot with a lot of these, the people that do reactionary videos. I don't usually do this kind of thing, but there was just so much in this that I felt like it really needed to have its own debunking from actual Palestinian voice, from somebody that knows a little, that can really express the way that I can't, I can't fully express it in this exact way. So that's why I thought this was really important to do this, even though I don't normally do it.
I appreciate you doing it.
All right, I'm gonna do this again, but yeah, I thought that was really interesting. He admits that he's gotten caught up in propaganda before.
Yeah.
You have to be reading alternative media on that stuff to even be awake to the fact that it was happening. Nobody in the mainstream media was reporting it.
No,
and I commend you for that. So I was a late comer to that.
And they marginalized anybody who told the truth about it.
Yeah,
like Bill
of course.
Binney, the top NSA codebreaker for decades. He was the one who said there's no way that DNC server was hacked by Russia. That didn't happen. It was local. And so I knew from day one that was all made up. Anyway, do you worry that, you're such a staunch defender of Israel, it's going to that it'll wreck your peace candidate status? And, you're not, are you for sanctions on Iran? And are you for sanctions on Iran?
Yeah, I would say one of my, primary foreign policy objectives is to stop from having a nuclear arms race in the Mideast. And ultimately, I think that would include,
So you don't want other countries to get nukes because Israel has one.
Well, I don't think I wish Israel didn't have it either. But I hope that we can get to a point where there's a peace in the Mideast and that the Israelis can get rid of theirs as well. But I understand if you're a country that's 9 miles across and everybody around you wants to not only kill you, destroy you, but to commit genocide against your people. And it's the stated objective of Iran: commit genocide against all the Jews. And, I can understand why you would want a powerful weapon.
I would think you would sympathize with Iran more because the CIA overthrew their government.
Yeah, but I'm not listening.
Just right before
I love the Iranian people. And, in fact, my campaign staff has a number of Persians on it. And listen, I think the
Yeah. Go ahead. Whatever you want to add in that.
Like, I need to bleach my eyeballs.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm trying to remember what he said because he did just say a whole bunch.
God.
Oh, when he's talking about the nuclear arms race in the Mideast, Israel is the only country known to have nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
State Department.
That would be my remark to him. Is Israel's the only one that we know of that has nuclear weapons, and possesses the capability to actually do something with them. So if we're concerned about the nuclear arms race in the Middle East, we should be concerned with the nuclear arms race happening everywhere. Then you should be concerned with what Israel is going to do with that. And one of the comments a little while ago was talking about how, Israel is always bombing Syria, and Iran is pretty much the next place that they want to start tensions with. Israel is who we should be concerned with. And when we have someone say he's the president, is he going to allow the nuclear codes both here and there to get used because he's in the pocket of Israel? I mean, that's where this is so scary.
Dangerous. It's really super dangerous. The rhetoric around this is just really dangerous. And I think most people, it's just going right over their head.
Yeah. All they see is at least he stood up to the tyranny and during the pandemic, and that just erases all this other stuff for people. I don't really care about war stuff. That doesn't interest me.
No, because it didn't affect them, and it doesn't affect them as personally as the other stuff that he stands up for, right? So the other things affected them closer to home, and it affected them more recently, and it's in their recent shadow that is either is still happening or just recently happened, right? But when you think about foreign policy, it doesn't affect as many people directly, even though it does affect us directly. They're not realizing how directly it is affecting us. And that's the thing. There's a disconnect because it's not right here at home. It's not affecting our everyday directly where we see it affecting us directly every day. You know what I mean? We have policies and we have things that happen that affect us every day because of our foreign policy, but it's not blatant in our face the same way that COVID was blatant in our face.
Yeah.
True. I think the only thing that I would say, not necessarily arguing with that point, but the fact that people don't realize how closely linked our domestic issues that we're having right now are because of all of the war issues that we've got
Oh,
going
definitely.
on. You know, so like inflation is insane because of the war in Ukraine. The recession that we're experiencing is because of the war in Ukraine and the amount of people that were unemployed that got kicked off unemployment rolls so that Biden could conveniently say our unemployment is the lowest we've ever seen. I mean, 8 million jobs haven't just popped out of thin air. Like they're trying to act like, you know, it's the greatest economy ever. And so much of this has precipitated from the Ukraine war, which could have been completely mitigated. And Russia was willing to come to the table on that. Like so many other countries, it's like this is where someone like RFK drives me crazy. It's like you seem intelligent until you start talking shit like this, because it's like you're trying to act like the US isn't the instigator in so many of the global issues going on that affects us here. Yeah, like $4 a gallon for gas. I mean, it affects us when we have these international issues, and because all of the money from our taxes is going to a corrupt Pentagon, is going to a corrupt government that doesn't want to support the American people and support the people of Ukraine and support the people of Israel. It's like they have the so-called democracy, they have universal health care, and we pay for that. That comes out of our tax dollars. If we weren't giving $3.5 billion every year to Israel, imagine what we could do for the problems that we have here in this country. We could have Medicare for all in a second. We could have children not going hungry at school. We could not have the level of homelessness that we have. But, you know, Israel needs their Iron Dome funded, so we don't get that.
It's insane, the stranglehold that's happening like between the two countries, and it's like there's things happening that we don't even realize are in the works, and you can just tell that it's underlying. All right, I'm gonna mute again, and look at how close we are. We're getting close.
We are almost there.
I know, we're getting close to the end.
The Iranian people are more like Americans than anybody in the Mideast, and that they share our values more than probably anybody in the Mideast. But you know, the Iranian government, are they trustworthy? No. I think the Iranian government is a dictatorship, and they're dangerous.
There are many temples in Iran.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm glad you agreed to talk with Max Blumenthal, because I'm not equipped, and so I apologize to my audience for not being more equipped on this. And I knew you would know way more about everything about Israel and Palestine than I did going into this, but I had to do my best anyway. Is there anything you wanted to say? Did I not bring up something that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, I could talk to you for a week, so I think we had a long.
Well, I really appreciate your voice. It breaks my heart that you are risking your peace candidacy over Israel, but but your voice talking about the regulatory agencies, talking about the corporate capture of our government, talking about Ukraine, talking about the intelligence, the deep state. It is so necessary, and you're clear on it. So I just want to say thanks for doing that. Thanks for your leadership on COVID. And I felt the same, like how you did with Russiagate. I would do the same thing with you. Like I was just like, oh, everybody says he's a crazy anti-vaxxer. I never thought twice about it. Right? I didn't look into it. And then COVID happened, and then I looked into it. And then now I know that you've actually, been a real hero, and just like you were for the environment. And now you're doing it on the behalf of those people, and you're raising issues. And I think everybody should go watch you explain your whole journey. We didn't get to it today, but your whole journey you explained on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I encourage people to go watch that. You took like 35 minutes, and you explained how you got involved with looking into vaccine safety, how the parents were begging you, and
Okay, I think that was the end of when they kind of like talked about.
Thank you,
stuff.
Lord.
We are done. We are done.
We have made it. We have made it through the journey.
Yeah. it was just something that was like really important, I think, to debunk and really give a platform to kind of pick it apart, because there was just so much in that, and there was a lot that I learned from you while we were kind of picking that apart. So I mean, I'm hoping that Jimmy will have Max or somebody, I'm sure, on to follow up and kind of like debunk the points that were made on the show, because I mean that seems to be a pattern that they do, that that kind of thing happens, and then he has somebody come on and they debunk his previous show and corrects the record. So I mean, right now everyone's kind of like, unless they are knowledgeable about the topic, they're kind of like in limbo as to knowing whether or not that's true.
Yeah, and that's how they get so many people too. It's just pushing the propaganda and the specific talking points, and sometimes put people in such a box that they're afraid to even say, "Are you sure?" Because they're so afraid that even questioning a statement being made is going to label them some way somehow. And that's, I mean, in so many areas of discourse right now, that's the huge issue, is just people are so quick to be like, "Oh, you don't agree with me? We're done talking." And that's not how we solve our issues and look at the broader problems and realize that a lot of these issues are being forced on us to be divisive and to have us not agree with each other on things, so that we're fighting and squabbling with each other and not seeing what the real issue is, which is our government is extremely fucked up and politicians are not who they say that they are, and like just so much of our economy and politics is captured. And I think RFK really exposes that level of capture when it comes to a particular part of our system. It's certainly not all, there's lots of other people and strings that are pulling things in the background, but this just exposes, one part of it. So I guess thanks RFK for at least doing that little bit.
Sure.
And I have the tweet right here that I during that segment when he brought up that he would debate Max Blumenthal. I just wanted to pull it up so that we can show the evidence of what Max is saying about how a day after RFK Jr. agreed on Jimmy Dore's proposal to publicly discuss his pledge of unconditional support of Israel with me, his comms director was dialing me up to offer me a series of unbelievable excuses why he could not why it could not happen in the foreseeable future. So, and he links to the actual episode that we watched right there. So I just wanted to, for full disclosure purposes, show and document that on the screen that is what is being said at this time. So, I'm sure that Jimmy will probably have RFK on as opposed to having RFK. I mean, he will have Max Blumenthal on instead of having RFK and Max on to have a debate or a talk about it. Unfortunately, it would have been nice.
That's how it goes.
But yeah, it's very typical. I can't support this. Like I can't.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, I'm not voting.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Mostly just because I don't see the point anymore. I mean, I vote, like I used to vote all of the time. I'm seeing that our voices don't matter, and that's being shown. I mean, it's been talked about on some other channels about I think it was like a Princeton study being done that like 90% of what we want, like as citizens, isn't happening because we don't have any power, or like 100% of us, like we don't have any ability to really change policy. And it's because they keep the system going the way that it's going so that they can perpetuate all of the gains that they get from this highly capitalist system that benefits them, that they orchestrate and create legislation and policies that benefit them. I mean, we saw this at the very beginning of the pandemic where they they wanted to make sure they got their salaries increased. They wanted to make sure that them as government personnel, that they had their medical care covered. And then they bumped up the stock market so that the stock market didn't crash at the very beginning. And then they used the CARES Act to funnel over $3 trillion to the top. I mean, it's just, it's not a government for us. It's for them. And I kind of can't support it anymore. But I don't fault people that want to vote. And if you want to vote for RFK Jr., go right ahead. Like, I'm not going to judge people, because I also see everyone is so propagandized and everyone is trying to do what they think is the best thing. And I can't fault people for that. I mean, I have a lot of time in my day to just watch things and read things and see the bullshit, but like, not everyone has that luxury. It's a luxury for me. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm absolutely at the same point. You know, I used to think, oh well, you know, if you don't vote, then I would have all the talking points. Like,
careful, we're on the YouTube. You know how they love voting, because voting is excellent. It's the best thing you can do to affect change in your life.
It's awesome,
right?
Yeah.
Isn't that right? And safe and effective or something. I forget what the catchphrase is, but please insert the catchphrase here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's absolutely crazy. It's have you gotten any of the censorship dings on your channel yet? Have you been hit?
It's not censorship. I get the sense that my channel is being very suppressed.
Oh yeah.
And I also would say for like my Twitter as well. And it's because I'm not afraid to talk about these things. My very first video on my channel was talking about 2 men that were denied life-saving surgeries because they didn't want to take the shot. And I was just like, I don't care. I'm going to do this. Like, I want it on the record that this is where I stand on this.
Yeah, I got hit early on. I got hit a few times, and then they just like, what was it, March or something of this year? They hit me again, and it was for a video from a year previous, like when I first started out. Like, so like they will retroactively go back and like get you for stuff that like, oh, we'll just leave that there when we want to ding them. It's hard. It's really, really hard to get people to to find your channel and to promote it. And that's why I think it's really important too that we help each other out. And like, hopefully you'll get some new subscribers. Hopefully you guys will go over and check out our channel and her upcoming video. You said it's gonna be released tomorrow. Is that what you're saying?
If I can get my editing done by tomorrow, I'm hoping to have it done. It's basically a rebuttal to the House of Representatives vote saying that Israel is not an apartheid state. I'm trying to like keep it a little quippy and sarcastic, but really, really pushing against this narrative that Israel isn't an apartheid state is bullshit, and bringing a lot of facts to that. That's really what I tried to do on my channel. And that might be why I haven't gotten censored, but suppressed, because all of my videos, if I'm referencing something, I have the article, I show where it's coming from, because I think that that's important. And also, if people want to check me, if I got something wrong, it's like, please tell me where I got it wrong. And also, it's like, I watch videos and I'm like, I wish they would show me that link to that article, because that would be helpful. I try to provide that as often as I can, unless I'm just going on a little rant about something that pissed me off that day or whatever. But yeah, that Israel not being an apartheid state video should be out by tomorrow, and if not, definitely by like Saturday or something. So
that's awesome. Yeah, and I put links to find you on Twitter and your YouTube. I already put them in the show notes for this show on YouTube, but we'll update them so that it's on the Rumble and stuff as well.
I am also on Rumble. It's been a slow process trying to like get all of my YouTube stuff uploaded on there. I'm like, it's been like over 2 months now. I think.
Did you sync it? Did you sync them together?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, we did the same thing. No, because I mean, Rumble has been better to us than YouTube has, for sure.
Yeah, I've been doing live streams on there in the daytime, spinning music and playing music too.
Nice.
And that way, like, I can just play and spin whatever I feel like, and nobody's gonna bitch at me, and YouTube's not gonna ding me.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the link for the Rumble that's live right now as well. We have more people. We have double the amount of people on Rumble.
Nice. Rumble people. Snowy Leopard's daddy signed up for a monthly supporter on the Rumble locals channel.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, it shows it over here. That's awesome. I can't wait until they actually integrate it where we'll be able to put the chats up on the screen from Rumble just like we can from YouTube. Yeah, I can't wait until we can do that.
Supposed to do that soon.
Oh, the YouTube link in the description didn't work. I don't know. I must have hit the wrong thing. Well,
dang it.
We'll get it.
We'll fix it.
What is your YouTube channel name? Do you have it off the top of your head?
It's just at Empathic Times.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it's right on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
That's the right one right there. Dingo. I don't know why it didn't work.
The suppression has started.
That's right. We must shadow ban all characters. All right. Well, this has been a blast. Thank you, Amira.
Thank you both for having me. I really appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you wanted to update us about, what is happening in Palestine and or anything like that?
I think I would just harken back to, what I said earlier, which is that it's the children, both the Palestinian and Israeli children, that are suffering the most from this conflict and hostility. And both sides are, I'm not going to say Palestinians aren't, perpetuating some level of stereotypes and things like that. But it's the children that are suffering the most in this situation. And if we want to solve this, it means that we have to stop looking at this as just policy things, that it's really far and distant. It's real, and people are dealing with this on a daily basis. Children go to sleep and don't know if they're going to wake up in the next day. And they're always fearful for their families and stuff. And so that would be like just my main focus, is remembering that there's people at the end of this that are not the aggressors. They didn't start this conflict. And so as soon as we can do that and at least bring that level of empathy to the conversation, I think it will help, because that's what's needed, is to start looking at this as people and not just numbers on the screen, that are very distant. And that's what the media does. That's what propaganda does. Mainstream media is really just, they're such like separationists and trying to keep us, not thinking of these people as people. It's, they're aggressors, they're terrorists. And these are really easy and convenient labels to give to people so that you dehumanize them. We're all people. We are all connected. And honestly, like, the only way we're going to fix any of these issues is if we stop with all of the divisive, rhetoric and feeding into that and thinking that our neighbor is awful because they voted for Trump or they voted for Biden. It doesn't matter. And I think that as a collective, we can do a lot more when we come together.
Absolutely. I'm always saying the same things over here. Like we have to figure, if we look for the things that we agree upon and we can work towards those first, then we're gonna get somewhere, and we're gonna get momentum. And when we support each other, it helps all of us. It really does.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so where can, besides on your YouTube, so your YouTube and your Rumble, are they the same names?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, see, that makes it so easy. So we'll make sure that we update everything and we get the right links down below and all of that. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and you're welcome to come back anytime. We'll do some more. All right, you stay right there. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Please hit that like button wherever you're watching the content.
Peace out, everybody.
We appreciate you.